You're talking about morals. Who teaches their young children to just be different, hypersexualize everything in the West? And these are the people who are telling you about the morals. This is why I turn red every single time I read this bullshit. Putin is Yeltsin's revenge for the West. And I think that is absolutely spot on. You and I have been asking for a very long time, how do the masses of people get to be programmed or wired into believing something that is simply not true? Today, I'm not just gonna tell you exactly how that happens, but I'm gonna show you with a clear example of one of the most egregious things that I've read this year. It was so egregious, I actually had to stop and make a video about it. And I'm gonna debunk it bit by bit. I'm gonna tear this one a new one, if you know what I mean. So let's dive right in, guys. We have an article, it comes from the New Voice of Ukraine, and apparently the head of the Psychology University gives us the propaganda. This is how it happens. This is how it starts. It starts from the early ages, from when you're in school, from when you're in education, and then once you're brainwashed at that age, whatever happens after, you're going to see everything through that lens, and you're going to be inclined in believing whatever is being put in front of you. So let's wait no more and go straight in. Russia exists only for imperialism, says psychology expert. You already know what this is going to be about. What you don't know yet is how bad it actually gets. Let's go further. Russian dictator, there you go, Vladimir Putin is not only a product of Russian society, but also a key participant in its development. Roman Kechur, head of the Psychology and Psychotherapy Department at the Ukrainian Catholic University, told New Voice of Ukraine in an exclusive interview on July 13th, analyzing Russian life cycles. A few things here. If this is what the head of a university spews out, I think we're all in trouble. But you know what? For me, this is not news. So I'm not going to pretend like it is. I live in the West, even though I'm Eastern European, and I see this every single day. Whenever I ask people, why do you hate Russia? Why do you speak badly about Russia? And this was way before Ukraine. Keep in mind, this was 2018, 2019. Not a single person could give me a straight, honest answer and say, this is why, Seb, this is why. Everybody just said, well, they're just bad. They're just bad. Because what happens is, you see, they get wired from when they're young children and then young adults through the education system. So there is no substance behind it. That's why nobody can point to a single thing. Now, sure, today is easy. Oh, Seb, look at what they do in Ukraine. But back then, there was no Ukraine. So they could not give you a straight answer. It's just Rusophobia for no reason. Well, for no logical reason. There's a lot of reasons in the West to hate Russia. Look at the size, look at the resources, look at a lot of things. But the population doesn't think in those terms. They don't know why they hate Russians, they just do. Quote, Putin is the embodiment of this society. Otherwise, he wouldn't have survived, he said. Okay, so let's look a little bit at the society, because apparently the society is at fault. That's why Putin thrives, according to Mr. Roman Kechur, the head of the university. So, let's just talk about the Russian society, people. What's wrong with Russian society? It's a Christian society, Orthodox. So that box is checked. There's enough reason to hate them already. Second, they're the largest landmass in the world. Second reason to hate them. The country with the highest concentration of natural resources. Another box ticked. A country that has been historically, and even through modern times, up to today, very traditional, very conservative. They care about their traditional values. The nuclear family. Things that are all forgotten in the West. Now, do these people in Russia, the average Russian, do you have 5 hands, 3 pairs of eyes? No, you're just like me. What's wrong with the Russian society? Nothing. There's nothing wrong. What has Putin done has lifted the Russian society, and I'm going to talk about it in the next paragraph. Just wait, it gets a lot worse. Russia exists in cycle of real and false tsars. After a false tsar, there is turmoil, followed by the rise of a real tsar. A false tsar loses or gives away land, while a real one establishes totalitarian rule, embodying the strong hand ideal and implementing imperialism. Well, let's just stop right here for a second. I want to show you guys two graphs. Well, one graph and one statistic. So let's look at the first one. Do you see this? This is the Russian GDP from, let's look at 1999, 2000, that's when Putin took office, and look at what happened up until today. Just take a close look. Now, the dips you see there was because of the economic crash. Look at where Russia was and look at where it is now. And also, bear in mind, these numbers, take them with a heavy, heavy dose of salt because they come from the West, who have proven time and time again they do not understand Russian economy one iota, one bit. Let's move on to the second one. They talk about land mass, about getting more land. Let's just take a look at some numbers here. Do you see that? Russia is twice as big as the next two ones, which are Canada and China. If you put Canada and China together, that's how you get to Russia landmass. Russians don't need more land. That might have been true in the dark ages, not today. They have more land that they can use. Their population is minuscule compared to the land mass. What they need is more people, more births. The birth rate needs to go up. It has nothing to do with the land. How can somebody who's ahead of a university, of any university, be that stupid? But let's move on to the next bit, because like I said, it only gets worse with these people. Without the imperial idea, Russia lacks a sense of purpose. No, Russia has a sense of purpose, and that purpose is to preserve everything that's good that existed in the West, and now the West is doing away with. Like the things I mentioned before, the nuclear family, the conservative beliefs, the traditional habits of the people who inhabit any sort of place. Today you're encouraged in the West to forget your traditions, no matter where you're from. That doesn't happen in Russia. That's the purpose of the Russians. Religion, family, prosperity, that's it. It's not that hard. We in the West find it very hard to believe because we've abandoned all those core principles a very long time ago. For cappuccinos and lattes from Starbucks. That's what we do here. Moving on. They don't prioritize, oh, this is the part that really got my blood up in my head. They don't prioritize building good highways, establishing quality universities, preserving nature, or developing people, humanitarian projects, and caring for elderly and the children. Their aim is to conquer land for the glory of the Russian gun. Putin discovered and exploited the mechanism that generates Russian power through trial and error, but he didn't create it, Ketcher said, describing Russian society as a wild mix of paranoid discourse and antisocial behavior. Okay, let's start with the beginning. Russians don't prioritize building highways and quality universities. Speaking of universities, I'm going to get to the highways in a second. Speaking of universities, I've made a video that this idiot, Roman Ketcher, might want to take a look at. I'm going to link it right over here. It was about the education in Russia and China compared to the rest of the world. The Russians kicked Western ass for breakfast in every single field. It doesn't matter if you talk mathematics, IT, whatever. But this guy, he knows nothing about it because he himself has been propagandized. That's what it is. Then let's move on to the highways. Have you guys taken a look at the Russia Putin inherited from Yeltsin? It was a depressed Russia. If you speak to any Russian, they will tell you that those times were worse than the Dark Ages. 100%. It was a country that could not recover for 10 years after the fall of the Soviet Union. They couldn't recover economically, national identity, everything was gone. When Putin took over Russia, it was a slum. That's what it was, a slum. Nobody wanted to live there, not even the Russians. The suicide rate was through the roof. That's what he inherited. Look at Russia today. Look at the buildings. They said, I'm glad he's speaking about highways. So if they're not building any highways, how come they built the largest bridge in Europe, the Crimea Bridge, that you guys want so badly to destroy? I'm just asking for a friend. And then they're saying about quality, about preserving nature and developing people. What does developing people mean? Developing people is just gibberish, it's just jargon. Developing people, the only way in which you can develop people is to educate them, to give them the ability to think for themselves, not to program them. That kind of developing, Russia does not do. The West is an expert at that. We develop people to the point where they're incapable of finding their way to the coffee shop without the GPS, without Google Maps. That's what we produce in the West. They don't go by the same tropes there. And then he said that, again, the fear of the Russian gun. Again, he's going with the imperialism. Speaking of imperialism, how many wars has Russia started? I'm just asking for a friend. Since Putin came to power, they fought the Chechen War, the Georgian War, and this. Well, the Georgia wasn't a war necessarily. It was, we know what it was. It was NATO there. But there were two wars. The Chechen War, which Putin handled impeccably. That's why the Chechens today fight in Ukraine on the behalf of Russians, contrary to what the Western media would tell you. Scott Ritter was in Chechnya, and the footage was there for everybody to see. Tens of thousands of soldiers getting ready to be sent to Ukraine. And they were happily going to Ukraine. That's what the Chechen War resulted. And I'm pretty sure that many, many years after you and I will be long gone, the Ukrainians and the Russians will join hands because they're the same people. And this falsehood under which we live in the West will not last forever. Let's move on. There are enemies everywhere, no borders, we attack everyone hates us, but if they hate us, they might as well fear us. We'll scare everyone. Well, there's a little bit of truth in there. Do you know why? Because the West has been attacking at Russia for, what, 30 years now? Well, that's if you forget about the Cold War period. Let's just talk about the situation from the 2000 onwards. It's 24 years since they're constantly bashing Russia. So, of course, those people have had enough and just said, you know what? If you keep coming, we'll show you who you're messing with. That's pretty much the message. So, yeah, that part, half true. This society also exhibits antisocial behavior with no morals where everything is allowed. They can bomb Kharkiv where civilians live and claim it wasn't them. They justify their actions with lies, saying there were Nazis in the targeted buildings, and they move on dropping the next bomb, catch or explain. Well, there's NAZIs, people, in Ukraine, and they thrive there. They have streets named after NAZIs. They have statues built for the NAZIs. That doesn't happen anywhere else in Europe. So that, you're wrong. Again, Roman Kechur, the big ass kisser. Then moving on to the next one. They say antisocial behavior with no morals. Oh, I'm glad you brought the morals. What are the Western morals these days? There's no more genders. I've seen senators in the United States asked, what is the definition of a woman? And they didn't want to answer it. It's not that they couldn't, they didn't want to. Because we've polarized even the most basic things. If I tell you, you know what? This is a white mouse. In the United States, in the big West, oh, you can't say that because you might offend somebody. You're talking about morals. Who teaches their young children to just be different, hypersexualize everything in the West? And these are the people who are telling you about the morals. This is why I turn red every single time I read this bullshit. We are the ones destroying the young generations, telling them, no, being normal, that's not good. It doesn't make you stand out. You need to be you need to stand out. You need to be special. You're brave. And what does that encourage? Exactly the immoral behavior, because that's the quickest and shortest way to getting attention. This doesn't happen in Russia. Take a look at how people dress. Look at the clothing. That should be one of the first giveaways. Look at the clothing in Russia. Look at the clothing in the West. Take a good hard look. And then the last one I'm going to read. Putin's death would bring turmoil, offering Ukraine a chance to integrate into the Western civilized world. Western civilized world, really. Expressing hope for a better future for Ukraine with Putin's death. Well, so they're waiting for Putin to die. This is how stupid these people are, thinking, oh, after Putin dies, Russia will crumble. Russia will not crumble. You see, Russia was close to crumbling with Yeltsin, but that's because he was a weak leader. He was one of the weakest leaders Russia has had in history since, even if you go back 500 years ago. However, to Yeltsin's credit, he knew that what he was doing was wrong. He was a corrupt and he was a drunk. So he's made Russia the biggest gift ever by naming Putin president. That was his, I think it was Scott Ritter actually who said some very, very wise words. He said, Putin is Yeltsin's revenge for the West. And I think that is absolutely spot on, nailing the nail on the head, 100%. Now, with what the future holds after Putin's death. I mean, Putin's not going to be here forever, but he will be remembered, mind you, as one of the greatest leaders Russia has ever had. He's going to be right up there with Catherine the Great and Peter the Great. Make no mistake about it. But what happens after his death? Well, there's an entire apparatus in place, and unfortunately for these Western weasels, I don't think there's a single one that is as moderate as Putin, at least none that comes into the forefront yet. I mean, there's Medvedev there, but I don't think Mr. Roman Kechur, this ass-kisser of the West, would prefer. Do you think Medvedev would have Putin's patience? Come on, people. Come on, let's be serious. But guys, let me know what you think about this propaganda piece. This is the very definition of what's been going on in the West for so long. It's just that this one specifically comes from the New Voice of Ukraine. However, this is the same thing you read in the West. Copy, paste. Guys, it's been a pleasure as always. I can't wait to see you in the next one. And until then, take care and bye-bye.